Hello, nerds. You have the unfortunate error of discovering my repository. It can be used to automatically respond to users' messages with potentially very in-depth responses with links, extra buttons. The users are able to give feedback to whether this message is helpful or not. So we're going to learn today how we can set this up in our own Discord bots. And of course we can use this in other platforms, but for the most part, this is built for Discord, especially since it's built, with all this code in mind for Discord. We're going to skip this how-to dependency section just because the docs on it are plenty fine to implement the system, but we will be going over this how-to-use section. Assuming you've already got your Discord bot code written, implementation is actually very easy on the code side. Once you go into your add event listeners method, we're just going to add in a new Discord implementation. All right, so this requires a URL and a logger. So the URL should point to this AutoSupport folder. We'll talk more about what goes in here in a second. So to get that, you always call getClassLoader, getResource, AutoSupport. Don't need to do anything else. All right, so that will always point towards this folder so long as it is directly in the resources folder. If you have it in some subdirectory, you'll need to define that subdirectory, like folders/AutoSupport. For simplicity, keep it in the root folder. You'll make it too complicated. This next logger section is just if you need to print out information. I highly recommend at least setting this to something so you can log information. So if something goes wrong and you're not sure why, you can see what the bot is doing behind the scenes. We have a simple method logger info that we'll use. If you don't want to log anything, again, please do not do that. But if you do not want to log anything, you can just put in null and nothing will be logged. Of course, I'm not insane, so we're going to go logger info. All right, so now in this AutoSupport folder, the first thing you need is a config.json. Case is important, all lowercase config.json. In here, you should have staff roles, a logs channel, and a verified role. A verified role is optional technically if you don't use the verified option. We'll talk more about that later. So to get your roles, you'll go into your Discord. You'll click on your name, right click on your role, click copy ID, and then you can go back into your editor and add the role. So I've already done this, of course, so I'm going to delete that. But we have once you define all your staff roles and your logs channel, which is just used to make sure it's good for user feedback. So if I go into here, logs, you'll see when users are happy and unhappy with the response. So always define a logs channel. All right, to create the official response messages, we should go into any folder under the AutoSupport folder. It also supports subdirectories, and create a new JSON file. We'll call this tieshoes.json. Now a blank file isn't very helpful, so let's just go to the wiki, copy, and paste. And now we'll start to fill in the options. So we'll paste this with how to tie a shoe. We'll use question. So question means that whenever a user asks a question, like how do I, or has a question mark at the end, anything that kind of makes this sentence look like a question, the bot will recognize. It's not quite a perfect system, but if someone just says, I want to tie a shoe, it will not recognize that because it's not really a question. All right, so let's delete that. Only unverified. So if you want to send specific messages to unverified users, then you can set this to true. So if people have the verified role, they will never see this message. This is only helpful in a handful of scenarios, so we're just going to delete this. Channel whitelist, we want to set this to true. So we want our message to only respond in one specific channel. And we'll say that is off topic, why not? So we'll copy the ID of that channel and paste it into this list. If you have multiple channels, of course, you can define multiple channels. One big thing to recognize is that we're using strings, not numbers. If you use a number, it will break. Use a string. All right, delete after answer. So if you set this to true, the message will delete 30 minutes after the user says the answer was correct. If you set this to false, the message will stay. So if you let the message stay, it's a little bit more clear to the user how to solve the question. Like if they come back a few hours later, come back the next day, and they'll get confused as to why the message isn't there. So personally, I like to keep this to false. But if you don't like the bot spam in your server, then you can set this to true. All right, so now keys. This is the important part because this is how we recognize whether a message should actually be responded to. So we look for keywords. So we're going to say tie, not, and those are pretty good indicators. So we'll say those are 2. Then we're going to go with a really good indicator, shoe, 3. We'll also add in a boot, because we tie boots. We'll add flip-flops because, of course, you tie flip-flops as well. Let's go with a negative indicator next. So say we definitely don't want to tie... I'm looking around my room for examples. A wire. Let's say we definitely don't want to tie a wire into a knot. Then we can use a negative number to make sure that the key threshold is not passed. And I think that's good enough. So we'll say that you have to get 5 points. So if someone sends a message like tie shoe, it'll recognize tie for 2 points, shoe for 3 points, and that totals up to 5 points. So the message will be sent. But if we then include something like wire, then it'll actually be 4 points instead, which is not enough to send the message. Also, if we say something like tie knot, that does not add up to 4. That only adds up to 2 because this can only be recognized once. So if you wanted that to not be the case, you could do something like tie 2 and knot 2. So now tie knot would add up to 4, but we don't want to do that. So tie knot 2. All right, so the message is what the bot will actually respond with. So we could respond with a YouTube tutorial. I think I'm just going to insult the intelligence of the user. You are stupid. All right, so now if we want to add new line characters, you have to put in new line characters. You have to do that manually. We don't do it for you. So you are stupid. How have you not learned? Cool. All right, so media. If you have an image that you want to show to the users, let's find a nice shoe. This is a bad idea. You should always save your images to like a GitHub repository so you can save those, but we're going to copy the image address. If you don't save your image to a known location, then there's a high risk that this link will not exist at a later time. And that was just not at all valid. This is not a valid link. Let's find a valid link. Let's go to my GitHub. Go to this repository. AutoSupport. So I know there's images in here. Now we can copy this link address and put it in there instead. Cool. This will be shown at the bottom of the message. I can get an example of that real quick. Hopefully. Maybe. Yes. And people can click on it to enlarge the image. Okay. Last but not least, we got this button. This button isn't very useful, but sometimes people click on it. It's for if you have more information. So for example, I have this web editor option for these chat colors. So if you click on this web editor, it takes you to, well, the web editor and allows you to mess with the options yourself. I also included that link in the message itself because I know that not everyone's going to look over at this button, but sometimes the buttons are useful. The button text is the actual visual appearance of the button. It's the label, what gets shown to the user, and the link is what is, the user is directed to. All right, we're going to test this in console instead of Discord just because that is easier to show. So to do that, we're going to add a console implementation. Console is equal to new console implementation. You have to send that a URL and system.in, or whatever you want your console to be, and console.start, though that should be called after this print statement because console.start will eat the thread and you will never see that thread again. All right, actually this should be enough. So if we run this and let the compilation happen, and of course sneakily fix any errors behind the scenes, we can now type how to tie a shoe. And well, the bot told us we're stupid and we have not learned. But if we type something like tie a shoe, it didn't find anything because it wasn't a question. We could rephrase that. Shoe tying. No. Putting a knot in a shoe is pretty difficult. And it recognized that since I put a question mark at the end as a question. And of course, again, it told us we're stupid. Now this, all right, let's test this on our Discord server. We can type in how to tie shoes and the bot will tell us we are stupid. How have we not learned? Now there's a few extra things that we can talk about here. If we go back to our JSON file, we'll notice that we have the button and media left over. And you can see that the media is trying to load. Not sure why my connection seems to be poor. And the button is here. If we want to remove those, easy peasy. We just remove them. Fix the JSON formatting, save, rerun the bot. And this time, once the bot comes back online from watching us sleep, we can say how to tie shoes. And it will not have the same extra button, and it will not have the picture. So now if we say this didn't answer the question, you'll see that the message is deleted, and in the logs we see a message that the user was not happy with the response. And it tells us what the user said and what the bot thought. In this case, of course, the user should have been happy because it answered the question properly. So if we instead type how to tie shoes and click this answered my question, the message will stay, the buttons will be grayed out so they can't send the message again, and the logs will say, hey, the user was happy. If we instead had the option to delete the message, so let's delete after answer true, rerun the bot. So we say how to tie shoes. We say this answered my question. This time, the message will be deleted in 30 minutes. All right, I believe that's about everything we need to say for this bot. Hopefully this will make your support channels much easier to manage. Good luck.